everybody, welcome to another episode of Eyes on Geopolitics. We got a full crew here today. We got Andy Milburn, Mick Mulroy, Jason Lyons, and myself. A lot going on as usual, nothing different. First and foremost, let's kick off with what went down in Russia, Ukraine. Obviously, it's been like almost more than a month where like Russia's just fucking indiscriminately bombing the shit out of Ukraine. Ton of civilians being killed. And you had a bit of I guess, online brinksmanship, a little bit of trolling going on online. Medvedev, the former president of Russia, the deputy chairman of the Security Council, whatever kind of bullshit fucking title he has now, was kind of going off on Trump a little bit. Trump responded with saying he moves some nuclear submarines to specific positions, even though like they're always out there doing what they do, So Mick, you wanted to get going on this. Mick, of course, is back in the motherland of Ireland right now, so shout out to Ireland. I have to do that. I'm contractually obligated. Mick, what are you tracking with this? Yeah, every show. You're right.
Every show. That's right. Yes, I just got off the Patrick, which is the mountain where the Irish and obviously Catholics believe St. Patrick spent 40 days and 40 nights for Christianity. Highly recommended, whether you're religious or not. Currently, I'm driving on the wrong side of the road, so I'm not going to turn my camera. But on this issue, so just there's a thing called the Dead Hands Plan for Russia, former Soviet Union, now Russia. And just to explain why this was significant with Medvedev, who's now the deputy national security advisor, was talking about it. That's what he was talking about. And what it is Russia's plan that in the case of a nuclear war, they have an automated system to respond. If their systems believe that their command authority, or what they call their command authority, has been annihilated. So the way it works is if they lose contact with the command authority in Russia, there's several systems, radiological, seismic, etc., that tries to determine whether there's been a nuclear exchange. If there is, it launches this command missile into the air, which then flies around Russia, launching whatever's left of their ICBMs with nuclear missiles. So we don't have that system. We keep a human involved the entire time. They don't, which I think is obviously irresponsible. But that is what Medvedev was talking about, that got people pretty worked up. Although, I think you already said it, D, Russia constantly talks about nuclear war. So it's kind of losing its oomph. But President Trump, in a not normal scenario, started talking about where our nuclear submarines are. And we have nuclear-powered submarines. We also have nuclear-powered submarines that can actually launch nuclear weapons. It's like 14 of them. He didn't reference which ones he was talking about, nor did he really reference where they were, other than they were going to be closer to Russia, which for everybody's knowledge doesn't really matter. They can hit Russia from wherever they are. Going closer to Russia doesn't really matter. I mean, it might even compromise it. But I guess the point from President Trump was, stop talking about this. We got nuclear weapons too, and we can launch them at any time. So I think that was the concern. That's what the discussion that went back and forth. We generally never talk about where our nuclear submarines are, but I would have to point out that he really didn't. It was more of a kind of back off kind of statement. Anything specific.
Yeah, and just for context for everybody, this was Medvedev started popping off because Trump took the 50-day limit down to 10 days for figuring out a deal or a ceasefire with Russia and Ukraine. So that's kind of where this stirred up.
He just should have just ended it, right? They're not doing anything that indicates that they're looking toward a ceasefire. So this is just giving them more time to incrementally take, in Ukraine at a cost. I think the last time I saw was like over 1,000 fatalities, Russian fatalities in one day, 24-hour period. But it's time to move on. It's time to actually put our words in motion and show that we have a backbone. We need to go straight to the sanctions. Probably won't change much, but at least cause them to have a difficult time funding their war machine. And then we need to start getting more weapon systems, offensive and defensive, into Ukraine or Russia. President Putin doesn't care about any of the rhetoric.
Andy, you look like you were ready to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, actually, that's my my resting listening face. But yeah, so to Mick's point, the submarine comment is probably deliberately vague, but yeah, I mean, it could mean one of three things. I'm reading a lot of almost semi-hysterical talk in the paper about we're playing brinksmanship with Russia. There's always this fear, isn't there? There's always this segment of our population that builds Russia into being a more friendlier than it is, but at the same time is terrified that Putin will escalate, and it always has this segment of the population, which is a sizable segment and represents both the left and the right wing, has them running scared. So I mean, the comment really is kind of honestly meaningless. I mean, as Mick points out, at any given time, the U.S. routinely keeps strategic submarines at sea that carry nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles, right? It's part of our nuclear deterrent. So, we're moving those around all the time. And Russia has always been one of our potential adversaries, whatever the media may be saying. And so, in that sense, this is a meaningless statement. In other words, now it could be that the president's referring to nuclear-powered U.S. attack missiles that could be moved closer to Russia for one of two things: either to be used against Russian strategic submarines or to launch non-nuclear cruise missiles, all right, intended to strike targets on land, all right, which would be, I suppose, more of a meaningful statement. But in any case, I think it was a statement. I don't know. But the point is here, I think the statement was intended to say it's positive for anyone who thinks that we shouldn't be trusting Russia. It's a statement that, hey, look, we do have a nuclear arsenal, and if Russia is going to start threatening us with anything, then obviously we can. I'm trying to avoid using overly destructive terminology here, but we've got the upper hand is the bottom line. Yeah, and to Mick's point about jumping right away to putting pressure on Russia, while all of this has been going on, of course, Russia has massively stepped up the air campaign against Ukrainian cities, targeting civilians, not just civilian infrastructure, but civilian buildings, and I'm getting feedback, of course, from friends in Kiev, and but you just have a look at the statistics. I mean, in the last, during July, I forget what date, but it's early July. I mean, just one raid, Russia launched 700 drones. All right, and now these are mostly they're called Duran 2s. It's a Russian version of Shahed, and they're getting increasingly sophisticated. They're capable of artificial intelligence. They're getting faster. They fly at higher elevation. They have advanced electronics. They have the Russians are getting better at counter-jamming. And it used to be that 3 to 5%. I mean, prior to July, 3 to 5% of these things were getting through. The Ukrainians were doing a phenomenal job with their air defense. But in July, all right, which is just ended, 15% of these drones are getting through. So you think 15% of 700, you're much better at math than me. So that's 15 times 7. That's a significant number of these drones. They're carrying warheads, each of 40 kilograms up to now
105.
Well, there you go. Up to 90 kilograms. So that's a lot, and all of which targeting civilian infrastructure. The Ukrainians are struggling and to keep pace with that. And while they're inflicting, as Mick pointed out, really high casualties on the Russians, 1,000 casualties in 24-hour period, as we discussed it before, is an average. Now, I'm saying 1,000 casualties, but in some days that's near 1,000 deaths. I mean, it's phenomenal when you think about it. Those were World War II level casualties. The Allies in Normandy were routinely, the height of fighting in Normandy with a far larger army, were taking between 1,000 and 1,500 casualties a day. So that's commensurate with Second World War, but higher in terms of percentage of guys that they have on the ground. Not clear how long they can continue to sustain that. So the Russians are trying to counter that by really going after civilians with these drone attacks. And just to kind of finish up here, very interestingly, when we talk about how we can help Ukraine, certainly with air defense systems, but the Ukrainians are doing a phenomenal job by themselves, working with companies in the Baltic state, in Estonia, on developing interceptor drones. All right, very highly sophisticated interceptor drones to intercept Russian drones. So you've got this cycle of threat, counter threat, and the interceptor drones that the Ukrainians have been experimenting with so far. There's four Ukrainian firms, and then there's an Estonian one. They have a success rate of 70% against the Russian Gerans, which isn't high enough, and they just need to produce about way above. Right now, they're producing about 200 of these drones a day, and they need to produce way more to be able to bring that number higher than 70%. And so you've seen this technological battle taking place, this competition that is so far beyond anything that we in the U.S. military, I think, can even adapt to at this stage. I mean, that's kind of a really it's a frightening aspect of modern war, and we've talked about it here before. That I'm not sure U.S. military, we're certainly taking notice of it, but I'm not sure how we adapt to that.
Yeah, one of my questions was going to be because I did see a report saying intercepting these Duran 2s is kind of expensive using whatever air-to-air stuff or Patriot or any other kind of SAM stuff. Is that the reason why they're developing and starting to ramp up production on the interceptor drones? Because it's way more cost effective?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it's cost effective.
And locally built, I guess, so it's
yeah.
good.
But it's not. I'm just trying. I'm wording this. I'm just thinking through this cost effect. I'm not sure. Yeah. So the Durans, the latest version of the Duran, which is the Duran 3, which is has phenomenal speed, like 600 kph, and can fly at higher. It's got a turbojet engine, all right, and it hasn't been fielded in large numbers, but it's a cost of 1.4 million, right? Which is a significant upgrade on the Duran 2. But as far as interceptors, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I would guess, yes, of course, the interceptor drones are far, far cheaper, but the goal is to produce about 1,000 of these a day. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a question of cost so much of just effectiveness at this stage. Zelensky has said that the program is going to cost $6 billion, which is a significant amount of money for the interceptor drones. And that alone won't be enough. I mean, I think, the guys who know far more about short range air defense than I do will tell you that you also need, you need to combine it with electronic warfare, which Ukrainians are. And kind of the Ukrainians have these mobile firing groups that have EW systems, but they also have anti-aircraft artillery like the German Gepard, with heavy machine guns that fire at very, very high rate. So you need a combination of all of these things in order to be effective. So you got both sides, battling for primacy. And I read somewhere that there's kind of a 15 to 20-day innovation cycle, all right, on both sides for upgrading software. It's an adaptation race between both sides. I mean, it's like something out of science fiction, right? I know this sounds horribly cliche, but it really is. And again, I hope that we're not just taking note of this, but that we are planning to adapt our systems, both our drone and our range air defense systems, to kind of keep pace.
Hey guys, I want to tell all of you today about a new newsletter that we're launching that encompasses both the Team House podcast, the Eyes On podcast, and the High Side news outlet, which I run with Sean Naylor. The newsletter is going to be once a week. It's going to come into your inbox, and you're going to get the most current podcasts on Eyes On and the Team House and whatever's topical or current on the high side. So it's another way for us to get the information out to you, as social media algorithms are pretty iffy and you never really know what you're going to get. So this is a once a week email. It'll slide into your inbox and it will have, the greatest hits of that week.
It's really good, man. I'm checking it out.
The website for it is teamhousepodcast.kit.com/join. teamhousepodcast.kit.com/join. You go there and you enter into your email list, or you enter your email into the little thing on the website, and you're good to go. And that'll be it. So we really appreciate your support and hope you'll consider signing up.
Where's the link?
The link will also be down in the description if you're looking for it there.
And that's teamhousepodcast.kit, K-I-T, Kilo India Tango.com/join.
Andy, you were in that military world for a very long time. Are you confident that we are doing that?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, there's and it's not a simple fix, right? Look, Mick knows more about this than I do. I mean, he was way higher in the Pentagon's labyrinth than I was, but the ability to do a quick turn on adaptation with acquisition, even within special operations community, is something we've always struggled with. I don't know. I mean, I know we're experimenting with all these things, but I don't know that our acquisition system, our defense industrial complex is agile enough now to keep pace with this level of adaptation. Mick, what would you, just throwing the ball to you, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and it's something that it's been identified that it's not fast enough to even move at a pace that keeps track of just normal advancements. But stuff is happening so quickly in Ukraine that I think we're going to have to figure out how to keep pace. One is going to be, how do we get our hands on the new technology that's being developed and how to operationalize that technology? Hopefully that's part of what the U.S. gets out of its continuous support for Ukraine. I mean, I think we should obviously do that. I think we should increase our support. But one of the benefits we'd get, other than supporting an ally that's in an existential fight and seriously degrading probably our most dangerous adversary, but certainly one of the top two, we'd also should try to really capitalize on this, quantum leap of technology and how to use technology in modern warfare, both to get it ourselves and to be able to manufacture this when we need it. And right now, I don't think we're at that place. We're not even at that place for conventional weapons like, 155 rounds. It's something I think that's concerned a lot of folks in the Pentagon when they realize it's hard to keep up with just supporting an ally fighting against an adversary. What if it was us? What if it was a two front war? So a lot of big questions.
To your point about the inshore range air defense, the imbalance, the asymmetry between cost, right, which does have a cumulative effect. And you've got the Patriot system, or you've got even, the Ukrainians had the IRST, and the interceptor missiles cost $1 million a piece. I know sounds like an absurdly round figure to throw around, but you're roughly in that order, right? And for the Duran 2, much less than the Duran 2, which is what the Russians using right now. They're about $200,000 a piece. So there is an imbalance there. The other problem is that while 700 Duran drones seems like a lot, and it is a lot, the Russians haven't yet got to the point where they're swarming these things, really having hundreds of thousands of them on a single target. And that is really going to become a problem. And it's a problem that we in the US should be preparing for too. And interceptor drones aren't going to be able to counter that. The best defense so far has been, gun systems. And the Ukrainians do have, they've got something called the Sky Sentinel, which is apparently effective against, has been used against, smaller drone swarms. I think the Germans, Rheinmetall's got something called Skynex, but these are systems that are getting tested now in Ukraine. And again, I hope that we're not just paying attention, but doing our own R&D and acquisition. And even if we're doing that, it's a question of being able to acquire, procure, and field these things in the quantity that they're needed, and then adapt them to the changing threat. I mean, a 15 to 20 day innovation cycle. I mean, we just can't hope to keep pace with that. It's an irony, isn't it? We're the most powerful nation on earth, and yet we're seeing how things are evolving here and facing the fact that the systems that we have now are obsolete, and we're always going to be condemned to using systems that are obsolete. In this type of war, obviously we've got the F-35, blah blah blah, but I'm sure when it comes to defense against drones, air defense, it's a worrying asymmetry.
Yeah, very worrying. Going back to, I want to touch on the 10 days now, the 10-day deadline. What happens after 10 days? I know that India and China are getting a lot of their gas from Russia. There was talk about sanctioning Russia's, who they sell gas to and oil to. India indicated that they were still going to be getting gas and oil from Russia. So after 10 days, what happens? Do we push the goalposts a little bit more again? Like, what's the story? Well, because 10 days is coming up.
Well, it depends on whether the Senate passes the Sanctioning Russia Act. Because what President Trump's talking about was basically 100% tariff on Russia. I mean, we tariff Canada, so I mean, it's not. I don't think they're going to. And we don't buy anything from Russia because they don't sell anything worth buying except for energy. So that's not going to mean anything unless they actually do secondary sanctions, because that affects the actual countries that purchase things from Russia. And you just nailed it there, D. It's India and China buying Russian oil. If it doesn't deter them from actually buying it, and it just essentially, and I think it was 500%. Is what they were talking about with that act. It could be disruptive. I'm not an economist. I'm sure it will be disruptive to the international markets. I don't know how much more it'll be than what's already happening and just went into place. But hopefully it does keep India and China from buying Russian oil. If it doesn't, it won't have an effect. It just won't have an effect at all, except for maybe prices for us in the United States. And so it has to be a collective effort. I should say comprehensive. It needs to also include significant weapon systems without the restrictions placed on it. They need to be able to strike anywhere in Russia. Obviously, military targets, to Andy's point. Russia doesn't target military targets. Russia targets civilians, period. They just killed 30 civilians, 5 of them children, one of them was 2-year-old, within the last 48 hours. But of course, we don't do that, and we don't allow people to use our weapons to do that. And Ukraine's not going to do it. But they need to be able to hit military targets anywhere. They need to increase. There's a talk about a European defense shield-like system, which would include, I think, Western Ukraine. So there's a lot of things that need to happen if people are thinking that the these tariffs, these sanctioning bill is going to just change everything. Unfortunately, I wish it would too. I don't think it is. I think we should do it, and hope that these countries like India and China think twice and just don't buy Russian energy. But it's something to consider. It's also probably going to drive up, the cost of oil everywhere. So there's consequences to it. But if we say we're going to do it, and then we don't, then who the hell is going to listen to us from now on? You can't bluff. You got to mean what you say and say what you mean. Because if you don't, then this is going to be the last time we'll start becoming irrelevant. At least when it comes to the diplomatic side of this, if we don't actually do what we said we were going to do, because they have a chance.
You know what? I know this is a little bit slightly off topic, but it's not because we're still talking about Russia. And another interesting, we talk about what Russia is doing. I mean, I agree with D. I mean, of course I agree with you, D.
Thank you.
But again, Mick is 100% right. When we look at Russian actions, it's not just what Russia is doing within Ukraine. Russian sabotage operations in Europe almost quadrupled in between 23 and 24, according to it's RUSI, right? The Royal United Service Institute. It's a big think tank in London. So this is coming from a legitimate source, and it's everything from damage to undersea cables, interference with water supply systems in Finland and Germany. There's been attacks on military equipment in North and Eastern Europe. There's been warehouses set on fire in the UK. I mean, all kinds of stuff, and it's interesting. It's kind of a gig economy. The Russians, rather than, and Mick knows more about this than I do, but so many Russian intelligence agents have been expelled from their host countries in the last 2 years, that a lot of this is being carried out by proxies, by criminal groups, right? There was, for instance, I talked about a fire in a warehouse, a Ukrainian linked warehouse in London that was set on fire by a criminal. It was basically guys who'd worked for the Wagner Group. And so, and we may think in the US, hey, this doesn't affect us. It does, because a lot of this is NATO infrastructure. And, there's a problem here, because a lot of NATO infrastructure, for instance, the transportation systems that NATO will rely on in the event of the crisis, 90% of that is civilian, right? And so, and it's very vulnerable. So, satellite communications, NATO's uses, I think it's something like half of its satellite communications comes from commercial providers. And so it's a question of not just countering what the Russians are doing, but building up, just enabling NATO to build up this resilience to this kind of sabotage, because it's just going to increase. So my point is, Russia is doing the same sort of thing that Iran is doing regionally in the Middle East. I mean, there's all this malign stuff in the background that is becoming really, it is undermining NATO's ability to mobilize and deploy. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration right now, but potentially going ahead, as I said, these sort of attacks are going to increase, and there needs to be something done to at least signal that not only are we aware of this, but we're not going to put up this shit anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. Poland just detained, I think it's, hold on here, 32 people, Poles, Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and a Colombian guy on suspicion, some not just suspicion, but of working with Russia.
The fuck was that Colombian guy up to?
Yeah, he was accused in 2 arson attacks last year in Poland, Molotov cocktails. So, I mean, you're absolutely right, Andy. This is their way of indirectly pricking at NATO and the United States, without a head-on conflict. So, and that's like you said, it's going to, if it continues and it's left unchecked, it'll play out in the future. Because if it does come to head, they're going to now know what works, what doesn't work, who can we use, those sorts of things. So it's a battlefield laboratory for them. This kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh man, we'll see what goes down. Hopefully something fucking happens in the next 10 days, which it won't. It's not gonna happen. Anyway, moving on to what's going on in the Middle East. Gaza, Israel. Same old tune, it feels like. Thankfully, aid's getting in there. Hopefully, it stays there consistently, and we figure this out. Witkoff was in Israel, I believe, for negotiations or something. I mean, I don't know what he does really.
With Russia now, right?
Yeah, he spent like 5 hours in Gaza, and then Andy's right. Then he's on his way to Moscow. But I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, it requires about 400 food aid stations that were run by the UN to distribute to 2.2 million people in Gaza. There's 4 of them now, and quite frankly, you can't really cross the Netzarim corridor, which is cuts off the northern part of Gaza, so they can't even get down there to get the food. So there's a lot of discussion. There's 6 countries now involved in airdrops. Airdrops aren't the ideal solution. They're expensive. The ideal solution, or just the solution, would be to open the ground corridors and let trucks come in.
Why aren't they opening them?
I don't know. I don't think there's a good excuse. I think again, airdrops are good because they can get to parts of the population that you can't get food to by truck. But the quick answer here is to open the ground corridors. They need at least 500 to 600 trucks a day, and probably even more than that to catch up. But right now, we've hit, it's the worst case scenario when it comes to famine. We're starting to see starvation of children. They're usually first, and they're the most vulnerable. Then you'll see the elderly and the infirm. Then you'll see it could skyrocket. That's how famines usually happen. Once people start dying, they start dying in droves. So there's really no excuse. There's literally thousands of tons of food within miles of where these people are. It's not easy to distribute at all. I'm not saying that, but the quickest way to feed people in Gaza is to open up the ground corridors and let the UN and NGOs back in there to distribute. They need a lot of distribution points, and they need a lot of food. Flood in the zone, ground primarily, but air, good for the countries that rogered up to it. We need to start running a lot more flights per day into Gaza. Or it's going to go up. It's going to get worse.
In answer to your question to why the Israelis aren't doing this, and this is not a defense of what is happening at all. I'm just it's a massive failure. Back in May, Israel, the IDF launched an offensive as a campaign called Gideon's Chariots, right? And those of you who know biblical history, I think Gideon smote the Midianites. Is that right? Anyway, so the Gideon's Chariots was intended. It was intended to be a purposeful. It was kind of the brainchild of Zamir, who's their, the chief of staff, and it was intended to be finally a purposeful end to Hamas, because in the eyes of the IDF leadership, they need to get Gaza done and finished so that they can focus on Iran, because they are convinced that Iran will want revenge for what has happened in the last few months. So the part of basically Gideon's Chariots focused on offensives, re-clearing. We talked about this before, how the Israelis do not clear and hold. They clear and they clear again and they clear again. And every night down at the tactical level, they withdraw back into their FOBs. And there's a Magnon is the term for it. These expeditionary FOBs that they set up. A lot of this comes down to the fact that they are They're not good at urban fighting. They've got the Commando Brigade that is very good, that's made up of Israeli soft, but their mainstream infantry have shown themselves to be very poor, to be honest, from the beginning of the campaign. And that is just one reason why the Israelis are so heavy on supporting arms, is because whenever they run into contact, they come to a halt and they go firm and they bring in supporting arms because they don't trust their infantry to go in and clear buildings. It's not like Fallujah where we were going in, kicking doors and fighting the Muj, head on. They don't do that because their infantry aren't that well trained. And I can go into it tomorrow. I'm not just shooting from the hip here. Again and again, and I've got many friends in the IDF who will tell me this. They don't, they've got dudes in the routine individual and collective tasks that we practice to again and again are not done in the Israeli military. They have inexperienced NCOs. They have officers who don't go through the same kind of selection as training as we do. So it all cascades down, and that is one reason why they're relying heavily on supporting arms. But anyway, so there's all these offensives to retake areas that they've already taken. But in conjunction with that and this is where we're saying what's breaking down, is an attempt at population control. Population control has been practiced in every counterinsurgency, but the Israelis are doing it in a very ham-fisted way. We had our own issues with population control with the pacification program in Vietnam. The British did a better job in Malaya, where they put Chinese civilians into hamlets. I'm sorry, I meant strategic hamlets in Vietnam, but the British had a similar program in Malaya. Population control can be problematic, all right, because for a number of reasons. We did a better job as form of population control in Iraq and Afghanistan using BATS, using biometric systems, but also some of our listeners will remember in Baghdad in 06, 07, we had to use walled off sectors to keep the Shia and the Sunni apart from each other. Anyway, long way of saying, so the Israelis think that they can, by controlling food, all right, by denying food to certain areas, they can force the population into other areas. And as they force them into those areas, they can screen them, right, using all kinds of technical means, facial recognition, AI, and everything to ensure that they are separating the population from Hamas. There's all kinds of issues with this, that because their systems, the way they do things, are not good enough. They don't understand. They're not really. They're not embedded in the population in the way that we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, and the other thing is the Israelis are poorly disciplined. So they start moving populations from one place to another, or trying to control distribution of food. And coordination between units is poor. And so you get, you've had like 900 civilians at a conservative estimate killed as they queue for food, or kill as they're moved into areas where other portions of the Israeli military are moving them in. So the whole thing, just because it's been, I would say honestly, because of the training and competence at the tactical level is so poor, and the discipline is so poor, the whole process has broken down. It wasn't well conceived to begin with. And it is proving to be a disaster. It's proving a disaster to the Palestinians, of course, who are suffering starvation. I'm getting, I've got contacts who come out of Gaza working for aid agencies, and to include, in one case, a guy who's former military guy, special operations guy, and a very formidable Western military, knows what he's talking about. Yes, starvation is definitely a thing there. It's horrific. And it's a public relations disaster. It's a military disaster. It's a military failure for the Israelis, and they realize this. And in a meeting about it's like the 21st, 22nd of July, Zamir announced to the generals, hey, we need to get the hell out of, basically he didn't say get the hell out, but we need to just move on from Gaza. but now they're stuck with this problem. And you still got this plan to kind of still go ahead with population control, and that's why they're keeping the borders closed. And you've got a segment of the Western population who really believe that there's a purpose to this, and don't understand how badly things are breaking out, and think that all this word about starvation is made up by anti-Semites. And I would argue if this was happening in Europe, there would be a very, very different response.
Anybody?
Agreed. That's all I can say.
Well, I think history is going to judge people who restrict food to children that are in the last stages of starvation, and probably more important, they're conscious. We're going to fight for it because it's not made up. There's plenty of evidence to the contrary. They need to let more food in, and I mean, all you do is count the trucks. Right before the war, there was 500 to 600 trucks a day of food aid going into Gaza, and there was, I think 1,000 commercial trucks of food and such. None of it's going in. So, I mean, it's you don't have to be, a scientist on, or expert in IPC levels to realize. Sorry, there's a wedding right over here, and they just started playing a harp, because that's what you do in a wedding in Ireland. But that's something that you're not going to be able to talk yourself out of. History is going to record it. They need to change it. They need to get food in there immediately. The other aspect that came out, I think it was this week, with several Arab countries, including the Arab League, calling for Hamas to disarm and leave. Not sure why that took so long to call for them to do that. Seems like they would call for them to do that on October 8th. But I think it's important to point out, because ultimately everybody realizes there's no way out of this unless Hamas is not in charge, because Israel is not going to leave Hamas in charge in any form or fashion. I don't think we should expect them to. So they're going to have to start looking for the exit, and hopefully they take the exit. Yes, there's going to be a new version of Hamas. Yes, there's going to be major radicalization, from all of this heavy-handed approach. But ultimately, the leaders that carried out October 7th, or their, second-tier leaders, they need to go. They need to die, but they need to go and need to leave. They obviously don't care at all about the people of Gaza. They wouldn't have started this conflict, and they wouldn't have had a ceasefire 10 times over by now. They're more concerned about their own livelihood than the people that they claim to care about.
Yeah, Mick knows better than anyone here, and kudos to you and your organization, Mick, for trying to relieve what is happening there. I mean, the word coming out from the UN, but other agencies, 20,000 children in Gaza hospitalized with acute malnutrition. I mean, and this is a man-made crisis. And it just again, I think if it was happening in Europe, there would be a very different response. And I think part of it just pertains, it's not just about the right wing in Israel. The frightening thing is that there seems to be implicit condoning of this by a large segment of the population. And I think it comes down to, I'm trying to word this correctly, but the view towards the Palestinians is, it's like nothing that I have experienced in, we talk about racism and everything, but the view towards the Palestinians is really, it seems almost as though there's just any lack of compassion, as though they just don't care, as though they're talking about, it's almost as though if this was happening in the animal kingdom, there would be more compassion. It's quite shocking.
So we're also going to see several countries recognize Palestine as a state. The U.S. not being one of them. The reason for the U.S., one of the reasons I think, is because who's in charge? I mean, in order to be a state, you'd actually have to have a governing body. They don't really have it. You could talk about the Palestinian Authority. But one of the factors that goes into that, for people's knowledge, is that if you recognize Palestine as a state, then Israel becomes an occupying power, and then there's requirements for occupying powers that deal specifically with ensuring that no population that goes without food because you're now responsible for them because you're occupying. So there's actually legal consequences. We'll see, and I think it's what the UK. If
France.
there's no ceasefire, there's France, and then I think Canada, right? Um, so we'll see if they intend the declaration that it's a state to then mean that they're going to find Israel in violation of several international laws if they believe they're not providing adequate food to the population that they occupy. So that's one of the legal questions that will come from those declarations if they happen in September.
Why do you think the U.S. isn't doing it?
Why do I think the U.S. is doing what?
Isn't trying to declare Palestine as its own state?
Okay, yeah. So they don't. There's certain things that you'd have to have as a state. One is a governing body. They're
Right.
obviously not going
Okay.
to
Yeah, you mentioned.
recognize Hamas, a designated terrorist organization, as a governing body of a state that they would then recognize. The Palestinian Authority has very little actual authority. They're largely considered corrupt and inept, and in many cases, with the Palestinian people, less popular than Hamas, if you can believe it. So I think one, the U.S. of course supports Israel and doesn't want to cut them off the knees by recognizing a Palestine who is nowhere near close to statehood. That being said, unless it's changed, and maybe it has, the policy has always been the U.S. has always been a two-state solution, so that we should eventually end with an Israeli state, a Palestinian state that live in harmony next to one another, um, and focus more on their own people. Israel does, but Palestine, it focuses more on its own people than attacking its neighbor. So I don't know that that's actually the same policy that's existed for many administrations. But if it is, then ultimately we need to do things that pushes it in the right direction to get there. It's hard to even talk about it right now with the current state, to be frank. I don't think anybody in Israel, right, left, or center wants to talk about it right now. But I do think ultimately the U.S. could play a significant role when it's time to start heading back in that direction. And we want the Gulf states to do things like join the Abraham Accords or more of them, Saudi Arabia specifically. They're not going to do it unless there's, obviously a ceasefire and there's some kind of significant step toward a diplomatic path to a two-state end state in this whole Palestine-Israeli issue.
I got one last question for Mick, Jay, and Andy. You guys have Israeli friends. I mean, I do too. And I ask them, and I'll ask you guys. I don't know if you can get like kind of like a sense of what they're what they're thinking. But do they not? At least in my understanding, what I'm thinking is happening is Israel's actions over the last 2 years, or going on 2 years. I think has generated a completely new generation of anti-Semites because people, unfortunately, they're dumb and they can't discern between, a right-wing Israeli Zionist guy who wants to wipe the Palestinians off the face of the earth and like a regular, Joe Israeli person that lives in Israel that deserves to have a secure state like everybody else, like the Palestinians do. Do they realize that like anti-Semitism, especially in the West, I would say, is on the rise in a big way, and I think it's predominantly because of Israel's actions in Gaza. Yeah. Do you guys have a sense of that in terms of like the people that and you talk to that are from Israel, or
I have, yeah, like you said, I have a lot of Israeli friends, a lot in the IDF, as you would guess. I think it's important to point out. I mean, it's not a monolithic way of viewing the world in Israel. It's a democracy, just like it isn't in the United States. And it might surprise some people, but a lot of the IDF's pretty moderate, and they're ready to get this thing over because they're the ones. It's a lot of reservists, quite frankly, whose entire life has been put on hold. Like I know young folks that I've talked to that wanted to be a doctor, they've given it up now because they've 2 years now and they haven't even gone to school. So like You get the point. And I think people who think, they're anti-Semitic because they disagree with the policies of Benjamin Netanyahu, or man, they're missing a lot, right? So, I mean, are you going to be? It's not a perfect analogy, but are you going to be anti-America just because you disagree with Trump or Biden, right? I mean, it's you should be able to you should be able to disagree if you do with uh, Prime Minister Netanyahu and not be labeled an anti-Semite, right? Just,
Sure.
I mean, you
Yeah.
should be able to disagree because there's plenty of Israeli Jews that disagree with Netanyahu's policies, and I don't think anybody's going to call them an anti-Semite. So I think you should have the right to do it. But the people that are all of a sudden becoming, anti-Jewish because they disagree with the policies of current administration in Israel are just ignorant. I mean, I guess that's the root of all prejudice, whether it's anti-Semitism or racism or anything else like that. Um, but we live in a democracy. You can disagree with your own government. You certainly can disagree with another government. Just don't turn it into, something toxic like anti-Semitism or anything like that. And I think people that are using it as, hey, you can't disagree with me because, I'll call you a name. I mean, that's just immature. You got to be able to debate and uphold your own ideas. Um, and and there's plenty of people that disagree with the current policy of food restrictions, if you will, in Gaza, and they're from all sides of the aisle, and it's growing. And I think you can even see it in the White House. I think there's a big concern with how this is going because the U.S. now is part owner of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy or Jay, whoever, tell me.
Yeah, it's been this, my experience has pretty much been the same as Mick. It's my friends that are Israeli, Jewish, and even those that aren't. Most of them see it for what it is. You can't fight the empirical evidence of the starvation that's going on and say that it's justified. Now I do have some, and we talked about it off air before we started. I have some that are they actually surprise me, who are buying into this. There is no starvation. It's not happening. That Israel has fed more, has provided more aid than any country combined in history. And we just know that's not true. So the majority of them see it for what it is. And like Mick as well, a lot of my friends that are IDF are reservists, and most of them have said, we just wanted to get our licks in for October 7th, and now we want to go home. Of course, Hamas is not over and done with, and they realize that, but they know that this is an ongoing thing. So, but the way it's working right now, it's not what they want. So, but again, not a monolith. I can't speak for them, and they can't speak for all Jews. So, that's just the opinions they're giving me.
Andy?
Yeah,
What do you got?
I can't add to, and I can't add in a way that that does add to what Bill and Jason said. So, I'm sorry, to Mick and Jason said. What I can say is just comment that Israel has performed operationally very successfully against the threat in Lebanon and against the threat from Iran. Israel has failed tactically and strategically because of Gaza, and the war is a failure. 22 months in, I think this by Netanyahu's own stated outcomes, the war is a failure. Hamas is not only it hasn't been destroyed, it's still a long way from being destroyed. And the intangible part of this is, even if you could say every single member of Hamas's leadership has been destroyed, the organization cannot conduct any operations even at the tactical level. Even if you could say that, which you cannot, what lies ahead? What lies ahead in the next 5-10 years? Do you think that Hamas 2.0 is not going to emerge from the ashes of this after everything that has happened? It's that kind of, and Israel has gained approbium, which sort of what the word is, as in the eyes of the world, right? Yeah, I know that's a very general discussion, but a general point. But you think about for much of Israel's history, Israel has been able to has seemed to the world as kind of a David against Goliath up until, say, early 1980s, right? Surrounded by enemies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now the shoe's on the other foot, and Israel is seen. I'm just saying this is a common perception throughout the world, in a way that I would imagine most Israelis don't want to be seen. And that might be Netanyahu might be able to justify opprobrium. Sorry, it's just the word just came to me. Netanyahu might be able to justify that if Gaza had been a success, if Hamas had been absolutely destroyed, there would be no other threat from Hamas. But that hasn't happened, and so at great cost to its own reputation, and in terms of cost too in terms of lives. Phenomenally high cost in terms of Palestinians, the vast majority of whom, I think there can be no argument, have been blameless civilians. Israel has achieved nothing in 22 months, and in fact, not only achieved nothing, but it is in a worse position than the country was in 2000 on October the 8th, 2023. On October the 8th, Israel had the sympathy of the world, and they've squandered that in this badly run, highly destructive campaign.
Yeah, God, man, we should fucking finish on a happy note. Mick, give us some Irish fucking propaganda, please, before we leave.
Some Irish propaganda. But a lot of Irish propaganda doesn't actually end on a happy note, just so you know. I mean,
That's
I guess
true
you could
too.
look at it this way, right? So there was a two-state solution, right? At one time, when you're sitting where I am in Mayo County, during the Troubles, when Ireland was trying to get its independence, they went through famine, they went through nonstop war, and now please do come visit Ireland, and you'll see that it's there could be a good ending. Is my point. There can be a good ending. Ireland is now, I think, the actual most educated country in the world. It is one of the most charitable countries in the world, probably because of its history, and present company excluded, and potentially all Irish Americans excluded. They're some of the nicest people in the world. Somehow, after all that, they are in fact, I think, an example of how one could persevere and succeed. And there would have been a time when you'd be sitting here and you wouldn't have seen the light at the end of the tunnel. Just like there's little kids in Gaza that certainly aren't seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe this could be an example for them. How about that?
I like it. This episode is sponsored by Aer Lingus. Go to airlingus.com/eyeson.
Dennis and Jameson.
Yeah, visit Ireland.org. Anything else, guys? Great. I mean, as usual, this is awesome. I want you guys all, if you're looking for Andy, Mick, or Jason, their links are in the description. Best way to support the show is patreon.com/theteamhouse. All those links are in the description. And we also have a new newsletter for the Team House and Eyes On and the High Side with Jack Murphy and Sean Naylor. It aggregates everything. I know we put out a lot of stuff every week, so this helps kind of aggregate it, and you can see what you want to look at, what we're tracking, who's going to be on the shows, and all that. That link is also in the description. As usual, guys, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page. And there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.